You may be seated. This Honorable House now resumes its sitting. It is always a great honor and pleasure to welcome you all to the Honorable House of Representatives, and I trust that today's proceedings will be carried out in the usual productive and cordial manner. I would like to extend a special welcome to those who are joining us in the gallery, as well as those online via the various social media platforms and PBCJ. By the look of the uniform in the gallery, let me welcome Kingston Technical to the Houses of Parliament. Welcome. I hope you enjoy your time at the Houses of Parliament today. Clerk, call of the roll.
Mr. Clark. Here. Mr. Bartlett. Dr. Holness, Dr. Chang, Mrs. Williams, Ms. Grange, Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Dr. Tufton, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Mr. Green, Mr. Charles Jr., Mr. Matthew Samuda, Mr. Morgan, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Terrelong, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Witter, Dr. Dunn, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown-Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Enriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Carl Samuda, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Sibley's, Mr. Slowly, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Grange. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I want to join you in welcoming members to the sitting of the House today, and particularly to welcome our guests in the gallery. Today has been an interesting day for the students. This morning at our Joint Select Committee on the Integrity Commission Act, we had a number of students from one of our primary schools there, and they were given a very, very strong exposure to the workings of the committees of Parliament, and particularly the workings of Joint Select Committees. And today we have these students, and they are now exposed to the other side of the parliamentary activity, and that is the actual sitting of the House itself, and to witness the debates and discussions and cut and thrust between both sides of the House. Having these young people coming to the Parliament at regular intervals is a good way of securing the future of democracy in our country, and for them to be exposed to what are some of the finer arts of the whole business of parliamentary practice. So, Madam Speaker, today we intend to have a number of statements by ministers, and I'm going to, in fact, invite you to proceed with the agenda and for us to make a recommittal at a later point with regards to statement by ministers, as we have some 3 statements in that regard. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House are the following. Annual report of the Harmonization Limited for the financial year 2022-2023 and its related ministry paper numbered 06 of 2025. Annual report of the National Education Trust for the financial year 2022-2023. Annual report of the Universal Service Fund for the financial year 2022-2023. Annual report of the National Solid Waste Management Authority for the financial year 2023-2024. The Jamaica Gazette Supplements, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations 47, Volume 148, dated Saturday, January 18, 2025, Number 9, enclosing the Constitution of Jamaica. The Jamaica Gazette Supplements, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations 53, Volume 148, dated Saturday, January 18, 2025, Number 10, enclosing the emergency powers, specified areas in the parishes of St. Catherine, Kingston and St. Andrew Regulations of 2025 under the Emergency Powers Act. And finally, the Electricity Wheeling Regulations 2025 resolution under the Electricity Act. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate. To the Honorable House of Representatives, I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 24th day of January 2025, the following are passed in the Senate without amendment. An Act to amend the Income Tax Act, an Act to amend the Natural Resources Conservation Authority Act, and an Act to amend the Wildlife Protection Act. The Honorable Thomas Tavares Finson, President of the Senate.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motion given orally.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of the motion that at the next meeting of the Honourable House, I will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Countries and Parish Amendment Act of 2025. Counties and Parish Amendment Act.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move. Whereas by virtue of Section 55(1) of the Electricity Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may make regulations for the purpose of giving effect to the provisions of the Act, and without prejudice to the foregoing, such regulations may make provisions in relation to such other matters as the Minister considers necessary for the administration of the Act. And whereas on the 28th day of January 2025, the Minister made the Electricity Wheeling Regulations 2025, and whereas it is provided by Section 55(2) of the Act that regulations made under Section 55(1) of the Act shall be subject to affirmative resolution. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. The resolution may be cited as the Electricity Wheeling Regulation.
Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker. Marshall. Members, please just allow a moment. Just wanting to confirm something with Minister Vaz in terms of the Minister Vaz and your counterpart who So members, just a bit of housekeeping as a result of a late change. So the minister is going to be taking, not just tabling, the motion, notice of which he gave orally. So minister, we're going to send down to you a small note. There is an additional notice that must be given before we proceed to the next item on the agenda.
Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that I will move for the suspension of the standing order to enable me to take the motion, notice of which was given earlier.
Thank you, Minister. Questions and answers to questions?
Madam Speaker, I wish to ask the Minister of Science, Technology, etc., the questions with
Not in the House, not in the House. It is the Minister of Science, Energy, Telecommunication and Transport.
I so move for the questions to be answered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number one. Can the Minister indicate whether there is an existing agreement for the exploration of oil and gas within Jamaica or its territorial waters? Response. The Ministry has a specialized oil and gas production sharing agreement that allows United Oil and Gas of Ireland to exclusively export for oil and gas offshore Jamaica. The PSA encapsulates, thank you, encapsulates blocks 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 17, 26, and 27, as can be seen from the image below highlighting in yellow. Question 2, who are the parties to that agreement? Response, United Oil and Gas PLC and the Ministry of Science, Energy, Telecommunications and Transport. Question 3, when does the agreement expire? Response, the PSA expires on January 17, 2026. Question 4, what is the latest update on the performance of the agreement? Response, an aggressive work program was put forward in January 24 that will significantly de-risk identified oil and gas prospects of the south coast of Jamaica. The work program includes a concentrated drop core / piston core survey, which is now going through the environmental application process at NEPA. For this survey, a specialized vessel is scheduled to retrieve samples from the seafloor to test for the presence of oil and gas in Q3 of 2024, which marks a major milestone for the project. United Oil and Gas PLC continues to try to identify partners to share the risk in drilling with new companies looking at Jamaica as a drill or drop decision which is due, as I said before, in January 2026. Question number 5, how much has been expended on this contract? Based on the nature of the PSA, the government of Jamaica does not spend on oil and gas exploration. United Oil and Gas will spend upfront, and in the event of discovery, will recoup its cost. The total spent to date up to between November 2014 and May 2024 under the PSA by United Oil and Gas PLC is 39.3 million United States dollars, equivalent of 6.3 billion Jamaican dollars. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Turn your mic on, please.
Madam Speaker, I do have some follow-up questions for the Minister. Firstly, Minister, have any penalties been imposed on the party for the delays in drilling for oil so far? I know the contract did give a specific schedule as to what were the things to be achieved from the time it was signed in 2015 until now. What penalties have been imposed on the contracting parties to date, if any? And what reliance do you have that they will get to a point for drilling by 2026?
Thank you. So, member, nothing has come to my attention in relation to any penalties that have been.
Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Member, nothing has come to my attention in relation to any penalties that have been imposed. So I would suspect that they have not been, but I can check that to make sure that that is so. The other thing is that there was a request for an extension of the contract after COVID, which has taken it to 2026, January 26, as was indicated. I think it was a 2-year, if my memory serves me correct. They have been giving reports pretty often quarterly. I have not gotten anything in recent times. I know I met with them probably a year ago. So I'm not quite sure, other than what was prescribed in the agreement, that there's been any changes. So I take it that there has not been, because that has not come to my attention, and I suspect it would have to. But I can check that for you and let you know.
Minister, you've just mentioned that you've been given, I think you have to sit. I think you have to sit. I think you have to sit.
You what?
I think you have to sit.
Yeah, here.
You think you have to sit?
Oh, you want me to sit?
Yeah.
Look, I'm here, and that's what we're...
Minister, you just mentioned that you've been given reports from time to time. As you will remember, late last year there was a lot of rumors. And there was, in fact, a video of an investor briefing in London. Wouldn't it be appropriate for you to give updates when you get these reports so that people are quite clear that we haven't found oil as yet? That's one question. And secondly, I know in 2015 we were negotiating with another prospective contracting party, Repsol. Can you indicate what has happened with those negotiations?
Thank you, member. So the truth of the matter is, when that social media video went viral, I did make a statement at that time to say there was absolutely no truth, and whenever that would happen, if it ever happened, I would be the first person, the happiest person to make that announcement. So I can categorically state again that that's not true. The fact of the matter is that there really is nothing spectacular to report until such time as something happens that makes us believe that we are that much closer, which is what is going to be done in relation to the drilling and the other activities. What I can say is that United Oil and Gas have been looking for partners to raise the necessary capital to be able to go to the next steps, which has been a challenge, especially coming on the heels of COVID. So there has been no, based on the extension of the license for the 2 years, which expire in January, which is 12 months away, it really would not be practical to start any other negotiations until such time as the current contract is closer to ending. So I'm not saying that it wouldn't be wise to at least start in the year, which is now the last year of the exploratory license. So that I will take on board, because obviously it's January 26, we're in January 25.
Minister, just to follow up on that last question, because again, the rumors did spread after there was this presentation from the UK High Commissioner's office. Minister, would you not say that the reports in relation to the 3D survey, that was significant enough for the public to be aware of what those findings are in that survey? And could you also comment on what is happening in terms of the onshore prospectivity?
So thank you, member. I have no issue. You know that I'm one of those ministers that are very open. So there's nothing, as you are. So what I will do is I will take that on board, and I will direct that a comprehensive report be done that can be made public. It's a matter of interest for everybody, and it obviously has significant implications if we are ever successful in relation to our fortunes for the future generations. So I will do that. As it relates to onshore, there's nothing that is at my desk in relation to any activities that are require the permits or licensing from the ministry. But I will take your suggestion on board as we work together well as usual, and I will definitely have something and have it. I'll get a copy to you, and I'll also make sure that it is made public. Thank you.
Minister,
thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, just in the response to question number 4, you mentioned that the work program includes a concentrated drop core / piston core survey, which is now going through the environmental application process at NEPA. And it goes on to say, for this survey, a specialized vessel is scheduled to retrieve samples from the seafloor to test for the presence of oil gas in Q3 2024, which is, more than a quarter ago. Sure. So, which marks a major milestone for the project. So, really, has NEPA granted environmental permit to enable this drop core, piston core survey to be done? So does that permit exist? And secondly, this specialized vessel that you said would mark a major milestone for the project, and was, the reference here is that the testing would have, for presence of oil or gas, would be in Q3 2024. Samples would be, but that, did that happen or not? Or is this a somewhat dated set of answers that are just being given in January?
Thank you, member. As far from my desk and where I sit, there has been nothing to tell me otherwise that there has been any delay. But I will check that and get back to you in short order, because obviously if there was a delay and a slip, then obviously I would have expected to be notified. I have not been, and therefore it's a very good question. When I read it, I also thought the same. So I'll get that. I'm just waiting on a response from my permanent secretary. Thank you.
He read all.
Madam Speaker, I did get a series of answers to questions, yes. One including Petrojam. So I don't know if the Minister is prepared to answer those. I just got them. Yeah.
Answers with me here, but I will make sure to get them and respond.
Can we borrow your copy?
So it seems that I didn't take my own out of the file for the rest of the opposition. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Response to the questions on Petrojam Limited. Question number one, the Minister stated whether a committee was established and chaired by Mr. Chris Zaka to examine the role of Petrojam has made a report. Response, yes, a report dated May 31st, 2019 was made by the committee. Question number two, if so, when was the report made? Response, submitted report is dated May 31st, 2019. Question number three, what were the main recommendations from the report? Reference may be made to pages 34 to 36 of the attached report. Excerpts of same speak to terminal to the private sector. Sorry. What was the main recommendations from the report? Response. Reference be made to pages 34 to 36 of the attached report. Excerpts of same speak to the PRCs of the view that the transfer of active management of the refinery and terminal to the private sector provides the only credible opportunity to improve the operating performance of both entities, while also mitigating the operating and project execution risk to the government of Jamaica. Irrespective of GOJ's policy decision to maintain this CAF margin or otherwise, the PRC therefore recommends that the government of Jamaica exit active management of both the terminal and the refinery through a lease of Petrojam's underlying assets. Number two, Petrojam should make every effort in the short run to maximize the processing of sweet crudes and reduce production of HFO and increase production of the more marketable LSFO. Example, the sweet operating scenario. Three, further analysis the potential improvements in the operation of the terminal to allow for a lower cost operation, including demurrage costs, reception of larger product cargoes, product blending capabilities, and rack loading operations. As part of the divestment process, with the exception of price adjustments related to terminal fees, rack fees, and the CAF margin, no other price adjustment should be applied by Petrojam without the oversight of an independent authority. B, Petrojam should with immediate effect begin reporting the impact of all price adjustments separately on its financials. Keeping track of such adjustments above CIF pricing allows for a better understanding of the contribution of these market adjustments and facilitates the ongoing management and reporting of their impact. Question number 4, has the Cabinet considered the report? Yes, the Cabinet has considered the report by way of Cabinet decision numbers 20/19 and 2/20 dated 24th of June 2019 and January 13, 2020, respectively. The Cabinet confirmed consideration of the matter. Question number 5, what is the position of the Cabinet on the recommendations from the report? Cabinet indicated that the Minister should proceed with the parliamentary process regarding the report. As such, a strategic review of Petrojam Limited by way of Ministry Paper number 37 of 2019 was tabled in the House on July 2nd, 2019 and July 5th, 2019 in the Senate. And then there are some questions in relation to JPS.
Minister, firstly, you had mentioned that the report is attached, and there's no attached report to the question, to the answers here. But far more important, you have mentioned that the report was submitted in May 2019, and the Cabinet considered it in June 2019 and January 2020. That is 4 or 5 years ago, and we are yet to make a determination in relation to Petrojam. My recollection, Minister, is that the core recommendation is that the government should really exit participating in refinery operations, and that the refinery should be transformed into an import terminal. This is a fundamental recommendation. What is the government's position on that? What is the government's position on the Zaka report? What is it that you are going to be recommended to the Parliament?
Thank you, Member. So you will accept and understand that I am the Minister that reports to the Cabinet, and the Cabinet makes collective decisions. So it is obvious that if the Cabinet has not directed me in relation to the recommendations that have been made, and everything remains as it is, that those recommendations are still under review at this particular point. And until such time that I have gotten instructions and directives from the Cabinet, then there's nothing further that I can do. I have done what needed to be done based on the Cabinet instructions, which was, as was said, to indicate and table in Parliament coming out of the decision of Cabinet back in 2019. So as far as that is concerned, I can only say to you that it's still under review. No decision has been taken.
Minister, you will recall last year the Standing Finance Committee, and I suspect again this year, I had queried the allocations to Petrojam, especially in light of the report. That report, as I submitted then and repeat now, is a far-reaching set of recommendations as to how you should treat with Petrojam. What is your position in relation to Petrojam at this time? Is Petrojam going to be continuing its operations as is? Are the reforms coming? What is your position?
I can say to you in relation to the overall energy policy is that we are making progress in relation to several aspects of it. As we speak, there has been significant discussions taking place within government and also with outside of government in relation to unsolicited proposals that we have received. As soon as a position has been taken in relation to those, then obviously it will be my duty to go back to Cabinet and get some directions as it relates to what and where do we go. In the interim, we are doing as best as possible to make sure that we have energy security and that we are moving ahead with our renewables, etc. But as it relates to Petrojam, that is a fundamental shift in relation to policy direction that I can only recommend. Cabinet will have the final, but I can say that there are several discussions taking place with several different scenarios, which obviously I cannot get into now. But coming out of those, we will have a position as it relates to where we go based on the evaluation of those proposals.
Thank you.
Just, Minister, what seems a bit peculiar about this is that there were circumstances that led to the Cabinet appointing that committee, the PRC, I don't even know what the acronym stands for, but some committee, to look, Petrojam Limited probably committee, to look at the whole thing, to look at the whole scenario, and to make recommendations. So there was urgency around that because Petrojam had a lot of problems at the time, and as we know, there were subsequently other issues as well. So it seems that there's no real clear policy direction in relation to where the government wants to go. I mean, you've received unsolicited bids, which are being, or proposals, which are being reviewed. But what is the overall direction of the energy policy in relation to Petrojam? Are you inclined to go the direction that the ZACA committee recommended, or are you inclined not to, and to maintain the status quo and maybe entertain and review ad hoc proposals that may come from time to time from various sources? There's a lack of clear policy direction, and given the centrality of Petrojam's operations as the major refinery in the country, well, as far as I know, the only refinery in the country, and a major supplier to distributors and ultimately consumers of petroleum products. It's to have a 5-year interregnum with no clear idea of where the government wishes to go is unsettling. So I would just like to hear how long you think it will be before there's some clarity, or maybe you have a clearer idea in your own mind as to the likelihood of going this route or not.
Remember, so let me just say off the cuff that this would not be the first report that has been prepared from outside of government recommendations that has not gone much further, because at the end of the day, it's the government and the cabinet of the country that makes the decision. We had COVID, which put a whole new spin in relation, because that was a situation that was unexpected, and of course, we had to respond, obviously, as a government, and we did so. So you have to take that into consideration. That in itself made us start to think and review possibilities that were being thought of before. I can say to you that under my watch, from 2020 when I was appointed minister, the efficiencies of Petrojam have improved. Petrojam is absolutely much more efficient and still working to become more efficient. But you can understand as minister, my hands are tied until such time as there's a final position of cabinet. And this is not something that you just take lightly and make a decision. There are scenarios and there's pros and cons. What I can say to you is based on where the discussions are, the discussions I've had with the Prime Minister, and the directions I've gotten from him, within a few months, we will either be able to say that there is a new direction or there remains the same with some possible changes. But understand it's not that it's not on our agenda, but the fact of the matter is it is. And as I said before, the report went to Cabinet. Cabinet gave certain directives. And the bottom line is that nothing has really changed since then other than making sure we work with Petrojam to get it more efficient and to make it more reliable and, of course, diversified in terms of what it supplies.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the House.
Madam Speaker, the Minister...
You have more questions for the Minister?
The Minister is seeking to clear all the questions that we have under his name. So there's another set, but yes, there's another set regarding JPSCO. But Madam Speaker, there was just one other issue in relation to Petrojam. How are things going in terms of the legal issues with Venezuela? Can you say anything on that?
Petrojam shares were bought by the government and the funds remain in escrow. There have been discussions that have come to me through the Venezuelan local embassy here a few months ago, indicating that they would like to pursue to see whether or not there's a possibility. We responded to that. We have not heard back. But as it stands now, the answer to your question is that there's no change in relation to what obtained when the government took over the shares and put the funds in escrow. But it's not something that we're not open to looking at to have some kind of solution, amicable solution to get the matter behind us. Thank you. Madam Speaker, the next set of questions is in relation to Jamaica Public Service Company Limited. Question 1. In relation to the electricity, can the Minister state the total amount of technical and non-technical losses experienced by JPS? Over the past 9 years, the average annual technical losses has been 8.2% of JPS's generation output, which equates to approximately 358 GWH per annum. The corresponding average non-technical losses has been 18.9% of JPS's 18.9% of JPS's generation output, which equates to approximately 824 GWH per annum. The charts below indicate the evolution of losses. That chart will be accompanied to the yeah, have it? Yeah. Question number 2, can the Minister state the dollar value and percentage of the amount of electricity that is stolen from JPS distribution system? In 2023, the dollar value of electricity stolen was approximately 40.385 billion Jamaican dollars, equivalent of $258.9 million US dollars. And the percentage of electricity stolen was about 15.9%, which is about 80% of the 19.9% non-technical losses registered in 2023. Number 3, can the Minister state how much of the losses, both technical and non-technical, is paid by the Jamaican consumer? The USAID's non-technical loss report of 2022 indicated that the Jamaican consumer's payment contribution to losses was estimated to be about 8.7% of customers' electricity bills. As an example, the typical residential customer would incur additional costs of about $1,050 Jamaican dollars per month on average on their bills due to electricity theft. That is coming out of the USAID's non-technical loss report of 2022. So that is dated as we are now in 2025.
Minister, when we speak of the non-technical losses, we're speaking about electricity theft. What is your view of the role of the government in relation to minimizing that cost to the consumers, which you have noted to be over 1,000 Jamaican dollars per month on average? What is your view on how to deal with that matter?
Spoken on this matter, and this matter has been discussed at the highest level of cabinet. And I think Member Hilton as well, we have had several discussions on it. It is going to take a significant collaboration between JPS and the government of Jamaica. It is going to require, and I've said it here before, many millions, if not billions of dollars to really make it affordable to be able to get those who are not on the grid, and most importantly, to be able to stay on the grid. JPS, in fairness to them, have made several efforts. They have used technology, they have used everything to try and reduce the electricity theft. But the government does have a responsibility, and I think we are agreed jointly on this. I expect, and I would put it stronger to say, that I am confident that in the upcoming budget debate, that is going to be a key part of the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister's budget presentation, because it's something that we have spoken about, but more importantly, it requires the commitment of the government to invest a significant amount of money to really tackle it in a comprehensive, holistic way, which no government in my time and before has ever been prepared to do. So what we are doing at this point is Band-Aid. We are putting Band-Aids over a sore rather than dealing with the sore and getting it better once and for all. So I can say confidently that based on the discussions that I have been having, both from previous Minister, then Clark, to current Minister Williams, that is something, and I can tell you that there are studies on top of studies, member. I don't need to tell you because you left many of them back there. And at the end of the day, it's not the studies. It is to how do you implement the studies, which nobody has been able to do to this point. And I'm saying that as we speak, there's another cabinet submission that is being finalized now on the same non-technical losses in relation to what it is that all of these studies have said that has to be done and the level of investment that the government is going to have to make and work hand in hand, not only with the JPS, but with many of the members of parliament who are sitting in here now and who are not in here, because the fact of the matter is that this problem is a major, major problem. And if we don't tackle it, then the truth is that we are not going to get the benefits that we have all sacrificed to get in relation to where we have reached in terms of our fiscal affairs of the country.
Minister, I saw the look of surprise on the Minister of Finance's face when you mentioned that she's going to deal with it. But, Minister, you are aware that in April 2021, there was a private member's motion that has been on the table for us to debate this issue, and with some clear recommendations. Based on all the papers that we have been through, I put forward this. And I still believe that there is time before the budget debate for us to deal with some of these specific recommendations, because these are things that have worked in other countries. You've mentioned that $1,000 per customer is paid, per residential customer is paid per month. What proportion of the actual non-technical losses?
40 billion.
of that 40 billion, what proportion of that is paid, passed on directly to the consumers?
I don't have that exact figure with me here, but I will get it for you. But I suspect that it is substantial. I do suspect it is substantial. I see my team has finally come, so I'll be able to get some better details. That, as we mentioned, wouldn't be for your house and the leader of the opposition's house. I suspect you'll be paying a little more than that.
Yeah. Minister, just to reiterate that the question of how the 40 billion of non-technical losses through theft is borne is a very important question, because to the extent that JPS is able to shift that to consumers under the terms of their license or any regulatory allowance they may have, the incentive on them to manage the process is less. So I'd really like to get that data. I mean, the way that the answer has been formulated here is not really, doesn't extrapolate back very easily to that $40 billion number, because you say that what it says here is that the Jamaican consumers' payment contribution to losses was estimated, this is in 2022, our report in 2022, was estimated to be about 8.7% of customers' electricity bills. But I think, given that the figure that was cited here in 2023, which is not that long ago, was 40.385 billion of annual theft losses, of annual losses, and the percentage of electricity stolen, 15.9%. Knowing how much of that JPS has to absorb and how much of that they can just pass on for all of the consumers of the country to absorb is very, very relevant. So I'd ask if you could please provide that data. Thank you.
Motion that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motion relating to the sitting of the House. Motion for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of a bill shortly entitled the Counties and Parishes Amendment Act 2025.
Members, the question is that the standing order be suspended to allow the minister to take the first reading of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? Ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that the bill shortly entitled the Counties and Parishes Amendment Act 2025 be read for the first time.
The Counties and Parishes Amendment Act 2025 read a first time.
Public business, sorry.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for the recommittal of the item statement by ministers to allow the Minister of Culture, Gender, and Entertainment and Sports, as well as the Minister of Health and Wellness, to make their statements at this time. At a further point, Mr. Speaker, I may require another statement to be made. The House will be so advised. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from St. Catherine Central, Minister. Member from St. Catherine West Central, Minister Christopher Tufton.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, sorry, and colleagues. Mr. Speaker, today I am providing an update on the implementation of Jamaica's Know Your Numbers. Copies were made available. I'm not sure why you weren't given one, but they're there. On the implementation of the ministry's Know Your Numbers initiative, which was launched back in May 2023 during my sectoral presentation. Mr. Speaker, I remind this Honorable House that non-communicable diseases, including cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancers, are the leading cause of death in Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, premature death rates have increased from 17% in 2009 to 21% in 2020. Premature meaning deaths before the age of 75, which is the average life expectancy for Jamaicans. Over this period, cardiovascular diseases and cancers contribute the highest share of potential years of life lost. Despite the high prevalence of NCDs and risk factors, health-seeking behaviors remain low, and many Jamaicans are unaware of their health status until it is too late, meaning when it takes them to the accident and emergency or the morgue. Mr. Speaker, I wish to highlight that in 2017, only 59% of hypertensive and 58% of diabetic individuals aged 15 years and older were aware of their condition, leaving approximately 301,000 and 129,000 persons respectively unaware of their diagnosis. This is quite substantial because lack of information, not being aware, leads to the worsening of those conditions normally until it becomes an emergency. Mr. Speaker, the World Health Organization recommends early detection, screening and treatment, as well as palliative care as key components of the NCD or lifestyle diseases response. In line with these recommendations, the Ministry of Health and Wellness launched the Know Your Numbers Healthy Lifestyle Initiative in May 2023. The initiative emphasized awareness of key health metrics, including cholesterol levels, blood pressure, blood sugar, and body mass index. Mr. Speaker, it may be recalled that I announced this initiative in Parliament on the 3rd of May, and the initiative aims to conduct some 500,000 screening tests to help citizens identify their risk of chronic disease and to refer those with adverse results of further tests and treatment. This 500,000 was over a year and a half, so it actually cut across a financial year. Additionally, through the Know Your Numbers initiative, Jamaicans are to undergo screening on an annual basis, which is our advice, to know their health status, and outreach efforts to target the most vulnerable through mobile and community-based screening. Most Jamaicans tend to go to the doctor when they are sick. In fact, most Jamaicans are afraid of going to the doctor. That's almost a custom, a tradition. And unfortunately, when you're sick, as they say, the horse has gone through the gate already. You really want to know your numbers before and take corrective measures. Mr. Speaker, the objectives of the campaign to promote screening for diseases and their risk factors across the life course, so pregnancy, infancy, childhood, and adolescent, and adult and older persons, to provide client-centered screening services to targeted populations, to facilitate appropriate and timely referral and linkages of clients to further diagnosis and care services. Just to give an update on the implementation of the program, Mr. Speaker, as of November 2024, the Know Your Numbers initiative has conducted some 220,639 screenings, representing about 44% of what was originally targeted. Performance has varied across the regional health authorities. The Northeast Regional Health Authority has achieved some 83% of its target, while Southeast Regional Health was about 20% or so. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the number of screening tests conducted per test type, the results as of November 2024 are as follows. Blood glucose, 65,331 tests conducted, representing 65% of the target. Blood pressure, 78,854 conducted, 39.4%. Body mass index, 51,359 tests conducted, represents 29%. Blood cholesterol, 29,000 tests conducted, represented what was targeted, 100%. What it means is that most people who are tested for those particular. So we're not adding up all of those percentages. It's based on the target of the population at the time. In terms of the gender difference, 220,639 screenings which had been conducted for those identified. 66% were females, 33% males, which does point to a challenge in getting our men to screen. The ratio is consistent with the overall male-female health-seeking behavior pattern. When broken down by NCD risk factor screens, for females represent the majority, accounting for some 66% of blood pressure, 67% of blood glucose, 68% of blood cholesterol, and 64% of BMI. Mr. Speaker, for the screening tests which had been conducted, abnormal results were most common for blood pressure and body mass index screenings, often associated with hypertension and obesity, which are critical public health concerns. Persons whose results fall within the abnormal screening range, moderate to very high, were referred for follow-up care appropriately at their respective health centers or the health centers closest to them. In some instances, some were asked to visit their hospital because of their status. Mr. Speaker, the term abnormal refers to screening results that fall outside the clinical standard range, either below or above the normal range for the screening test. The total number of abnormal results reflected 77,263 or 32% of all tests, with blood pressure accounting for 34,920, 45%, BMI 29,347, 38%, blood glucose 7,175, 9.3%, and blood cholesterol some 5,821, 7.1%. Mr. Speaker, out of the 77,263 abnormal screening results, sex identified for 72,000, representing 68% females and 31% males. Females also had the higher proportion of abnormal results across all NCD categories, accounting for 65% of blood pressure tests, 65.9% of blood glucose tests, 71.7% of blood cholesterol tests, and 71.5% of BMI tests, Mr. Speaker. A critical measure of the effectiveness of the Know Your Numbers health screening program is the extent to which participants with abnormal results access the appropriate follow-up care, either at the health center or their private doctor as recommended by their referrals. To evaluate participants' follow-up behaviors after screening, a feedback survey was conducted with a representative sample of some 604 participants. Mr. Speaker, the survey conveyed several key areas, including but not limited to participant satisfaction, adherence to recommendations, and suggestions for improving the initiative. The results reveal, among other things, that 99% of respondents were satisfied or very satisfied with the Know Your Numbers initiative. Notably, 63% of the respondents indicated that they were aware that they had an existing condition prior to screening. Regarding referrals to further follow-up among receiving screening results, 81% of respondents reported being referred, 67% that amount affirming that they followed up within the recommended 3-week period. This is very important that at least having become aware, there is a majority that have gone and taken heed and done follow-up. As for lifestyle changes, 94% of respondents intimated that they had made lifestyle changes, while also indicating that since attending the Know Your Numbers event, they feel more informed on their health status. This is really what the program is intended to do. It's intended to create awareness, both of the need to screen, but also what the outcome of screening is for them and what recommendations that are required as part of pursuing a healthier lifestyle. Indeed, a doctor, the patient consultation is the end of the trajectory on that day, where they test, and then with those results, they have an audience with a doctor to make the referrals and the recommendations. Mr. Speaker, based on the Ministry's assessment of the initiative, as well as feedback received from participants, several key strategies are being implemented to enhance the effectiveness of the program. And these are strengthening of regional outreach and accessibility, the deployment of additional mobile screening units to underserved areas, particularly rural parishes, to enhance coverage and address regional disparities, and broaden the reach of screening activities. What we have found is that, indeed, even though we have nearly 330 health centers across the country, which of course serves primary care and are more community-based, there is still a large portion of the population that wants a more direct intervention. They want the screening to be brought to them. And indeed, it's a trend now. So the concept of mobile clinics, where you go into communities, you create a buzz of activity, and you essentially intervene with screening where people are in their natural setting, is becoming more the norm than the exception. And from a policy perspective, it gives rise to greater investments in mobile screening. Expanding testing and outreach initiatives. 5 more minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the member's time having expired, I beg to move that his time be extended by 5 minutes to allow him to complete his presentation. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
The request for extension of time is on the floor. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to my colleagues. The other is the increasing the number of testing sites and implement more outreach programs in Sierra, which is the region that would be considered the least performing region and the most populous region, as well as underserved peri-urban areas to close healthcare access gaps, developing regional specific health education campaign targeting high-risk populations with a focus on blood pressure, BMI, and non-communicable disease risk factors. In other words, what this has shown us is that there are some very specific and targeted interventions that may be required. And given the island-wide tour around this concept, we can now go into very specific areas and be more detailed in trying to enhance the outreach. The third is enhancing community-based interventions, which includes fostering more collaboration with local organizations, workplaces, and faith-based groups to increase participation in screening activities and assist with promoting physical activity, health diets, and stress management, and encouraging male health advocates to lead screening efforts and health promotion initiatives. We have actually started to collaborate with organizations, and instead of going into communities, we go into an organization. We have done a few over the last month or so. And then fourth, improving referral and follow-up systems, strengthening of referral mechanisms to ensure timely linkages to care for individuals with abnormal results, the use of the health center, and the outreach where the public health nurse can actually visit the patient at their homes is something they do now, but they can in fact enhance that intervention by targeting persons whose numbers are abnormal. And some of that is taking place. And fifthly, leveraging data for decision making, standardization of data collection and monitoring proposal to improve tracking of screening results and linkage care, and that I had alluded to earlier, where now the data is in hand, we can actually do the follow-up in a more precise way. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of these strategies is expected to increase screening participation to achieve the target, enhance adherence to follow-up care, and ultimately contributing to public health outcomes nationwide vis-a-vis the NCD reduction. The importance of preventative action, such as regular screening for the risk factors of NCDs, is underscored by the significantly high cost of treating non-communicable diseases, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. For this period alone, year to date, the National Health Fund, an agency of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, has expended approximately 9.4 billion Jamaican dollars on drugs to manage NCDs. For the current fiscal year, drug-served pharmacies located in public hospitals and clinics have dispensed approximately 2.4 billion worth of medications for managing chronic non-communicable diseases. In relation to the NHF Individual Benefits Program, the NHF has paid out some 7.1 billion in subsidies, covering 52% of medication cost for managing NCDs. And I raise this point just to make the connection, which oftentimes we don't make, between the cost of health care and preventative care. It is always cheaper to prevent than to cure. And in turn, it's from all aspects, from the quality of life, time with family, time to relax, as well as the economics of working and productivity and output, which is why we have to encourage more screening, which this program is intended so to do. In closing, the Ministry of Health and Wellness remains steadfast in its responsibility as the vanguard for the health of the people of Jamaica, and is focused on developing and implementing national strategies to improve health, delivering effective quality health services, setting standards and regulations, and carrying out essential public health functions while promoting intersectoral actions for health. While acknowledging that a healthy and stable population is needed to drive the country's development, the Ministry will continue to implement innovative programs like the Know Your Numbers program to support the quest for realizing the best health outcomes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the colleagues.
Member from St. Mary's Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Minister, we'd like to thank you for the update on the Know Your Numbers program. We see, however, while it's commendable that many people have come out to acquaint themselves with their health numbers, there has not been a significant uptake in terms of the projections that you had. Your document speaks to the fact that you were looking at over 500,000 persons for the target, and then a year and a half later, as you had indicated, only 44% of the target was met. You went on to indicate some reasons as to why it was not met, and some recommendations as to how to move it forward. As one of those members of Parliament who attended the Know Your Numbers clinics, there was a significant complaint from persons that the privacy with this blitz was not conducive. The privacy with the blitz was not conducive to their own health and personal view, in that they felt that with the large crowds that they had, people had access to some of their information. Not necessarily deliberately, but just by the fact that there were sheer numbers. And in terms of one of the recommendations would be to have, as you have indicated too, to have smaller focus groups through the churches, through civic organizations, etc. What is also interesting in the numbers that you presented to us just here is the ratio of male to female coming out to these, which was a 2-to-1 indication, 2-to-1 numbers ratio. What plans do you have to increase that? Because if you interrogate the numbers, you recognize that even though for those who have abnormal tests, the ratio of male to females was 2-to-1. And it would be interesting to find out or to extrapolate what would be the actual numbers male to female generally, because one could draw the conclusion that you may have almost equal numbers of persons who had diabetes, hypertension, increased body mass index, high cholesterol for the 4 years that you have checked. This is not a good sign, as you are aware, for a healthy population. And secondly, or towards the latter part, you mentioned that the National Health Fund has expended 9.4 plus 7.1 billion in treating the ill effects through drug therapy for the NCDs. And one of the questions that come up quite easily is, to what extent is the National Health Fund exposed, and in going forward, what support is going to come from government to buttress that increased expenditure that is needed for these NCDs? The other thing to Minister, I know that you have, as I've said to you, whether you did agree with it or not, they know the Jamaica Moves program. What you don't agree is when it started, but we are where we are. In that, obesity is a serious problem in Jamaica. I know we have looked at the sugar content of food, we have looked at exercise in young children, and we are looking at the fact that we more have a sedentary lifestyle in terms of our people. What other measures are being put in place, apart from Jamaica Moves, to help us to reduce the burden of these maladies on the Jamaican population? No. He's just adding one other point, that some people can exercise the rigorous one that you're having. Minister, I have 2 more minutes if you will. 2 minutes.
The member's time for responding having expired, he assures me that 2 minutes will be adequate to allow him to complete his move.
Member, you have 2 minutes for question, not to make a presentation. Thank you.
See, Minister, Speaker, I had some time to comment, and I embedded some of my questions in it. So I'm expecting the latitude. Minister, you mentioned about follow-up. And part of the reason why you have this only 67% of that 81%. So actually it's much less than the total number of persons who had abnormal results in terms of follow-up, because you actually have 67% of the 81%. Okay? So we're looking at about 35 to 40% of those persons who had abnormal results turning up for follow-up. And part of the reason is that the health centers, outside of the Know Your Numbers list, the health centers for people to get attention is usually overcrowded. And people can't go there and wait, and plus they don't have the money to go to the private doctors in many instances. So what measures are being put in place to ensure that access to those health facilities is easy for those persons without being cumbersome, without the long wait, and without the fact that they have to endure even waiting in the sun for significant periods of time? Thank you.
Put this over from there. Thank you very much, Member. Mr. Speaker, the member as it is right so to do, has asked several questions which may take a little longer than 5 minutes, but I'll try to go through quickly. On the issue of the 500,000 and the target and the 44%, by the way, it's not persons, it's tests. So there's a difference. So one person could do several tests. It's the first time, and it's a function of forecasting. The activity and the organization of the activity and the coordination in the respective parishes, including yours, which I was unable to attend, but it was well attended. Yeah, by the time it got to you, we had gone through a lot of the kinks. The first few was a learning curve. No, it is. It's a logistics challenge to set up an entire health center in a town center with all the other activities. But no, I'll come to the next one. So we learned a lot, and we tried to perfect it, or at least close to perfection, and so it got better with time. So I'm not too hard on the team for setting this target and getting where they are. I think what's important is that as we continue, it's going to be better. And so I wouldn't be overly critical, given that it's the first time. You spoke about your experience, and I'm happy you were there, and many members of parliament on both sides attended the events because we did invite them to participate and to encourage people to come out. The privacy issue, I can see where the perception would be that given these large crowds, people may feel a little exposed, and personal data is important. We did guard against that in terms of the rooms, particularly with some of the tests. I didn't mention tests like syphilis and HIV and so on, where we had a mobile bus doing those, and we did try to do that. I guess part of the consultation of the doctor, once having the data, which takes place at the end of it, we try to put them in a particular area. So you will have to help us with that and others, and we'll continue to drive that point. The male-female ratio, as I said earlier, is quite typical of the society. And I tell you who the greatest influencer of male or men going to the doctor is. They're women. Exactly. And I want to make a special appeal, since you have given me the opportunity so to do, to appeal to our women. If you want your man around a little bit longer, some of you might not, but if you want him a little longer, I would encourage you, please, maybe deprive him of something until he goes and gets his annual checkup. I don't want the men to attack me here on that. No, it could be dinner, it could be breakfast, it could be lunch. But it could be anything. No, but seriously. It could be dessert too. But seriously, I think our women have the greatest level of influence over our men. And it's necessary. Incidentally, the statistics, but seriously remember, the statistics state, I'm a creature of data, that our men lives on average 3 to 4 years less than our women. So the chances of you outliving your partner, assuming your partner, a lady, of course, men, women, is less than your partner outliving you. And that should be motivation enough for a woman to encourage you work harder. I don't want to get involved in that because I want the ladies in Jamaica to support me. But I think it's important for us to recognize that, and hopefully, and we need to make people aware of this. The other next best approach clearly is to have targeted interventions in areas like where men congregate. Because what we have found in the Know Your Numbers program is that the easier we make the intervention, is the more likely are people to respond. So there are some places of work where men dominate. There are places of entertainment where men dominate. And I could go on and on and on. So that kind of intervention, and then to use other key influencers. And I said that we were exploring all of those. The National Health Fund, your next question around treatment and the cost. Can I tell you, and I know this may be courting a greater debate, which has to happen, and I do intend to speak to it later on. The cost of drugs and treatment by the National Health Fund, and indeed by the society, private or public, is unsustainable if we do not take some corrective action around prevention, which is why the know your numbers is so critical. It's unsustainable. And I tell you, when I say unsustainable, I mean that it's just going to continue to escalate. And ultimately, all of us will suffer. And one of the things that we have to put on the table, and we have through a working document, and we're refining that now, is the concept of a national health insurance scheme. Now, the NHF is a form of a health insurance scheme. We need to move to the next phase, and there are some conversations taking place there. And remember, collaboration around that is not a bad thing. And I put that to you and to the opposition leader and others. And we're ready to talk on that. But we're going to have to take some decisions around how health is financed going into the future. And the NHF is doing amazingly well. They have added 5 or 6 additional categories of illnesses since I've been minister. But that has meant relief to thousands of Jamaicans, but it has also meant an increase in the cost of health care, and that will only continue. The other question around Jamaica moves. The issue of obesity, and you may have heard the Surgeon General in the US indicating that obesity is second only to smoking and alcohol as the primary cause of cancer-related deaths. But across the board, obesity is a major cause of cardiovascular disease and all the other things that we know about. It's as much a function of physical inactivity as it is a function of nutrition. And I dare say nutrition is a bigger contributor. What are we doing about that? One of the most game-changing policies that I think will take place, that myself and the Minister of Education are championing, and it's just now about to head to Cabinet for their consideration and hopefully approval, is a school nutrition policy. It's a joint submission, and I know Cabinet is seized with the urgency of it. Premature mortality and early onset of illness because of what we feed our children. A daily dose of the sugary drink, the deep fried this and the deep fried that, the ultra salts, ultra sweets. It is creating or wreaking havoc on the next generation. And we would do ourselves a disservice if we do not sit with industry and indeed establish policies that say we have to protect the health and wellness of our children. School nutrition is big, and Jamaica Moves is also in the schools. But there are other things like the elimination of trans fats. This is long in coming and needs to happen. Trans fats are the leading cause of cardiovascular-related disease. It's eliminated in America, in Canada. Myself and Minister Aubin Hill, as part of joint-up government, in support with the Cabinet support, are putting together a proposal for the eventual elimination of trans fats. And the other is front-of-package labeling, a little more controversial, but we're working on that. The other question is on doctors' consultation and your assessment of a low level of consultation. I don't think you should look at it like that, because at the end of the screening, all persons have a consultation with a doctor. Now, that consultation could be the only consultation required. In other words, a doctor could say, your blood pressure is a little bit elevated, but it may be what you ate for breakfast this morning. You may have a capacity to check it on your own. Check it, and if you think it's continued that way, then you need to go see a doctor. So it could actually end the overall consultation, and everybody went through that. The follow-up consultations could be in the public or the private, because many people have their own private physicians. And it's not always, we don't always capture that data. But the truth is, I do agree we need to take keen attention to it, because the lack of consultation could lead to the catastrophe that we all don't want to happen. And the other final point on the primary health care system, you spoke about overcrowding. That's another conversation, but this government has done more for primary health care than any other government before this one. And there is going to come a point when we will provide the data, the dollar data and the tangible data around renewal of the primary healthcare model to reflect the life stage approach, which, by the way, will replace Know Your Numbers, because it means anybody who goes to a health center will now be screened for all those critical vitals as a routine, so you will know exactly what is happening. The upgrading of our health centers, the building of new health centers, In the parish of St. Catherine, I'm proud to say, between the new Spanish Town Hospital and the 3 health centers that we have approved for construction, Old Harbor, St. Diego, and Portmore, this government is spending 10 billion Jamaican dollars in the parish of St. Catherine. So remember, no, but they are under Operation Refresh, which the NHF is supporting. We have upgraded more health centers across Jamaica than any other time before. But that's a conversation for another time. Suffice it to say that we understand and appreciate the weights. It's a function of build-out, equipment, but also of people. And you may recall that we had an occasion last week to look at the careers of Jamaicans and hopefully encourage others to become a part of the system. But I thank you for your questions. They're all important. And in the regular spirit of cooperation, I crave your cooperation so we can continue to build out the system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, could you confirm the procurement methods for the health sector? Is it on a regional basis or is it national? If you could just advise me on that. And having purchasing the procurement, having procured the medicine and medication, the storage and distribution of it, is there the sense that I have the sense that there's a need to look at the storage capacity, the updating of that, and the distribution methodologies, system-wide?
So the primary agency for procuring, storage, and logistics, movement of our medicines in the public system is the National Health Fund. And they provide all the functionality. I think they do a main procurement process once every 3 years. And in the interim, where they have shortages, they go to market to try and fill those gaps. They also have warehouses that are very well equipped, and they have a logistics system and a software back office system that tracks all those medications in all the pharmacies that they have right across the country, over 100 of those pharmacies. And they have done well. And remember, if you track the news, as I believe you should, particularly on matters of commerce, since it's your portfolio area, you will realize that the National Health Fund has received more awards, both from the public and private sector, in corporate governance, in effectiveness, and I could go on and on. So I'm not saying it's perfect. We can always tweak and improve, but I am proud of what they have done and are doing, and they continue to reinvent themselves to provide better services for the people of Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Speaker. There was a follow-up that I'd wanted to make, Minister. You mentioned about the public health nurses going out there and assisting with the follow-up. The concept of the community health aides going out in the community and doing that was the original intention of having the community health aides. Could I commend that this be reactivated and be part of the process of the follow-up?
Mr. Speaker, you're correct. The truth is both work hand in hand. The midwives, the public health nurse, and the community health aides. And again, I have to claim some bragging rights on behalf of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet and the government, because it is this government that has increased the number of community health aides from under 1,000 when we took office in 2016 to approximately 2,200, and they are not temporary. Under compensation review, they have been all made permanent. Hear, hear. And I think that says a lot for job security and for productivity. Now, we are in the process as part of compensation review still of revising their job description to have more community interventions, outreach. They do it now, but they do it more so in some areas than in others, and we're trying to standardize it. And a lot of conversation is taking place in that regard, and we'll give a better update on it later on. But our community health aides represent, as our public health nurse represent, the foundation of community health and the intervention that is required to deal with those who can't move, are immobile, or those who are not inclined to go into the health center. And I think they are doing an excellent job, and I want to commend them on your behalf for the work that they are doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I respectfully ask that you invite the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, to make his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a brief statement for the House. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, roofs are oftentimes the first point of failure during a storm, and the damage they incur can render families homeless or in dire conditions. The experience of Hurricane Beryl has served as a harsh reminder of climate change and the importance of resilience in our infrastructure. Many families were left exposed when their roofs were damaged or totally destroyed. What was clear is that the houses that followed the building codes, in particular the construction of their roofs, or constructed their roofs from slab material, concrete, that those houses fared much better, and those persons faced less dislocation as a result of the passage of the hurricane. Despite distributing almost 14,000 Hurricane Beryl recovery grants, we know that there are many households across Jamaica that were also impacted by the heavy rainfall due to the unusual, Mr. Speaker, the unusual weather patterns between July and December. Leaky roofs were, of course, the obvious most frequent complaints. Members of Parliament are usually the first port of call for assistance. Therefore, the government will be allocating $315 million or $5 million per constituency to assist the most vulnerable cases in communities across Jamaica. While the amounts to be recommended for the beneficiary are at the discretion of the Member of Parliament, grants should be within the range of $70,000 to $100,000 to make meaningful improvements to roofs, windows, and sideboardings to ensure that more Jamaican shelters can withstand the next heavy rainfall, tropical depression, or hurricane. Persons who are already beneficiaries of the hurricane relief grant will not be able to benefit from this allocation. We will be checking to ensure that there are no duplications, Mr. Speaker, of allocations across programs. I urge all members of Parliament to work closely with their constituents to identify those households that are most in need of assistance. It is essential that we focus on the most vulnerable, particularly those who cannot afford to repair their homes themselves. It is crucial that this program is effective and impactful, ensuring the long-term resilience of our shelters, particularly roofs. One challenge that we have encountered in the past with such programs has been the inability of members of Parliament to identify registered hardware stores in their constituencies that have the capacity to provide the goods needed for repairs. And another important point, Mr. Speaker, that the hardware is in close proximity to the household that is in need. This has oftentimes resulted in higher transportation costs and delays. Sometimes the transportation cost is higher than the grant itself. So Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, through the National Spatial Data Management Branch, has now mapped every registered hardware and haberdashery across the island. This comprehensive map will not only provide members of Parliament with a complete list of all the hardware stores in their constituency, but the data has also been spatially represented, so they can see where the hardware store is relative to the area of need. This means that at a glance, members of Parliament will be able to see where each hardware store is located in relation to the household in need of assistance. This will ensure that materials can be sourced locally, reducing transportation costs and improving the efficiency of the program. Another challenge that we have encountered is staffing resources. So, Mr. Speaker, in the last grant that we announced, it took some time for the grants to be approved because each grant had to be specifically assessed. Each beneficiary of a grant, their housing condition had to be assessed. And you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, how many persons we would have had to deploy to go out into the field to go and examine. So, Mr. Speaker, what we have decided to do, we will be leveraging the assessment staff of the CDF, of the Urban Renewal Program, and of the other units in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation to assist in the assessment process. Mr. Speaker, we will not be able to assess every beneficiary. And so what we will be doing is using representative samples and risk analysis to ensure that we can very quickly disperse the benefits. We wouldn't want, Mr. Speaker, to be in the next hurricane season and still not have the grants distributed. So we have to find expedited processes while keeping in compliance with the necessary rules that are in place regarding how these grants are distributed. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, I ask for the support of all members of this Honourable House in making this program a success. Together we can help to strengthen our communities, protect our citizens, and ensure that our nation is better prepared for the challenges that lie ahead in the next hurricane season. Let us work hand in hand to make sure no family is left behind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. We welcome, I think all MPs will welcome this additional assistance that's being made available to our constituents. And
Opposition Leader, sorry, turn your mic on, please.
Thank you. Yes, and it's coming at a time when we're moving into the drier period of the year. So it's a good time to repair roofs in anticipation of future rains. My understanding is that this is entirely for materials, not labor. Yeah, so each beneficiary will have to make their own arrangements as to how they actually do the works. And I look forward to the letters to explain what the assessment process will be in each case so that we can adhere to that. So this has our support, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you.
Member from St. Andrew North Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, you will recall that we have had discussions about the question of establishing safe rooms in each of these challenged communities.
Speak in the mic.
In each of these challenged communities. And what we have found is that in trying to do a general upgrade of the building in which people are housed, we prepare a specific room in the building where, in the case of a hurricane, the family can go into that room and be safe throughout the hurricane with winds and rain and so on. So we feel that it is a good approach, at least cost, to at least have that safe room in all of these challenged dwellings, as far as the funds will provide. I don't know if I could ask for your support on this and be able to utilize the funds in this way in a more extensive fashion.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I particularly, I note the support of the Leader of the Opposition.
Prime Minister.
And
yield to beauty. Here, Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm a councillor before I'm MP. And as councillors, we are, and I still consider myself a councillor in my own right, that we are really the first port of call. Not MPs, the councillors are, honestly. And at this time, I believe, to be able to efficiently distribute and implement this project, would you give kind consideration to an allocation for our city mothers and city fathers to participate in the process of being able to respond to our citizens at the local level, that our local government representatives should really form a part of this program as well? Would you give that kind consideration?
Member from St. Mary Western.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. First of all, let me congratulate the Prime Minister on this wonderful step. It has I know that the Prime Minister has heard from many of us on this matter, and to have our Prime Minister respond in such a positive way underlies what we on this side know about him. He listens, he responds because he cares. When you have a Prime Minister who is willing to respond to the needs of the poor and vulnerable, it is to be celebrated. And it is to be celebrated without apologies, and because many rural and urban folks own their homes, they don't necessarily need a new home. They need help with repairs to the home. And the Prime Minister and also the Minister of Housing has responded, and has responded in an aggressive, and has responded in a big way. And we know that this response is just the first part of the response. And Mr. Speaker, what I also admire about this program is that please, member from South St. Catherine.
Member from St. Mary.
Yes, sir.
St. Mary Western.
Is that
member from St. Mary Western
of local hardwares? Yes, Mr. Speaker. I am so ecstatic about this program. My apologies. But before I sit, Mr. Speaker, I also want to join my colleague from that side, the beautiful lady, in asking that our councillors also participate in this program with additional funds. With additional funds, because the needs are great. The needs are great. Our Prime Minister listens, and our Prime Minister will respond. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, just a minute. Member from St. Catherine Northeastern.
Thank you. Oh, the question. First of all, Prime Minister, I must commend you for this intervention. Well needed, and especially at this time. And may I encourage all members of Parliament to work closely with their councillors. We strongly encourage that behavior in this chamber, because in northeastern St. Catherine, for example, whenever there is an allocation, we think about the development of the constituency as a whole, and the councillors are invited to the table. So thank you, member from North Central St. Catherine. We are going to urge other members on your side. I know we have Councillor Mitzi Hudson, I think from Hampstead Division Central, where member Guy is the MP. We are hoping that you will include member Mitzi Hudson in keeping, okay? And so, Prime Minister, I am only looking forward now to further statements by the Prime Minister, as usual, about how we will advance the welfare of our people. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Member from St. Andrew West Rural. Sorry. Member from St. Andrew West Rural, just have a seat, please. There's a point of order. Member from St. Mary Central. What's your point of order, please?
The member is misleading the House. Mr. Speaker, that particular councillor that the member mentioned a while ago has always gotten every time. No. In fact, I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, that beneficiary listing for the MLSS program is still outstanding from her. She got assistance for some of her constituents. She don't give me the list of the persons who have gotten it. This is part of what has happened consistently, Mr. Speaker. She has benefited like all the other councillors.
The member from St. Catherine, Northeastern. There is not a cross conversation taking place, and so no. And you were given some amount of time. Now we'll take the member from St. Andrew West Rural. We will take the member from St. Andrew West Rural.
Speaker, yes.
Are you rising on a point of order? Go ahead with the point of order and to the point, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to note that my colleague from across, he appears to have been very irate. Now, in the interest of clarity, I did not accuse you of not looking out for the councillor. And I am sure, member from North Central, you know the process if you intend to speak. To the member from Central, I know that you have no difficulty in continuing the good relationship with Councillor Mitzi, okay, Hudson. And we continue to encourage that. That's the point. Have a good relationship with the council.
Member from St. Andrew West Rural.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to add as well, and to thank the Prime Minister for this allocation. As you all know, West Rural St. Andrew, very hilly terrain, lots of rain. No, I'm not asking a question.
Prime Minister, you may respond at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is very good when the House, it is very good when there is this energy in the House. It is also very good when we have parliamentarians rising to their feet to express their views on projects that affect their constituency. We note, however, that there are certain protocols regarding statements and how the responses to statements are received. Because this is not a statement on a ministerial matter, meaning that it is not on legislation or policy. This kind of debate where backbenchers and members of the opposition all speak is welcome. Outside of that, it would create some difficulty for the operation of the Parliament. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thank the members who have spoken on the allocation. As I noted, I welcome the support of the Leader of the Opposition, the member from North Central St. Andrew. We had a conversation some time ago regarding how best government should intervene in ensuring that we halt the deterioration of urban housing stock in particular. But the challenge of housing stock deterioration is not just an urban phenomenon, it is right across Jamaica. And it really comes down to a lack of investment in the maintenance of property, particularly residential property. And I know that it is always a difficult subject to discuss, in that Jamaica went through a period of time where incomes were eroded, and therefore persons were not able to make consistent investment in their real estate, particularly their residential properties. And as you go across Jamaica and you look at communities, many of those communities were established 50, 40 years ago, but today they are all in a great state of disrepair, including housing schemes, Mr. Speaker. And what the government has done is, through the NHT, we have made allocations to repair housing schemes that are 30 years old or more, and that program has been going very well. We do have some resources allocated to renew housing schemes that were not built by the NHT, and many of those housing schemes are in constituencies such as West Kingston, Central St. Catherine, in the Leader of the Opposition's constituency in South St. Andrew, and those need a special allocation from the budget. Then there are houses, say for example, in Central Kingston and other communities like that in East Kingston and Port Royal, where the owners, many of them have migrated and the houses are just there and they're all falling into disrepair. And then there are the general houses, general housing stock for persons who are really poor, who are just not able, they have no income, their family has no income, they have no means of ensuring that their shelter can actually act as a shelter, meaning protect them from a storm, protect them from the environment. And we saw this during the hurricane. And indeed, MPs will say here that their greatest complaint, their greatest request is for assistance with roofing Well, you are fortunate. That's not your greatest complaint. But I know from myself what I get the greatest request is for building support, building assistance. So, which is why, Mr. Speaker, we have crafted this program. This program is designed, Mr. Speaker, to support those households who would not be able to make even the minor repairs needed to give them some level of protection from a storm or heavy rain. The member from North Central St. Andrew was a big advocate for a policy of the government to establish a safe room in every household in Jamaica. And it makes good sense. Should there be a storm or a weather event that is a Category 5, for example, or even a Category 4, which would dislocate a great number of Jamaicans, if every house had this strong room, this resilient room, if you want to use a better word, then the dislocation that happened as a result of the passage of Hurricane Beryl would be minimized significantly, because when I toured the damage from Hurricane Beryl, particularly on the southeastern coast of the island, there are many households that were just dislocated, totally dislocated. So it is a policy that we are considering, member, and it is something that Jamaica should endeavor to do. Recently, we had a report from the Planning Institute of Jamaica regarding the number of weather events that Jamaica has experienced in the last 30 years and the impact of that on the budget. And of course, the conclusion is that we're seeing increasing weather events of increasing severity and intensity, which is having an increasing impact fiscally on our financial resources. And therefore, we must plan for the impact of climate change. And that's what we have been doing in resilience building. Before, when we make these allocations, Mr. Speaker, all we would say is we are making a building grant allocation. Now, we are trying to be very specific and targeted. We want the allocations to go towards your roofing in particular, or making your home resilient to climate. We're trying to help you in that regard. And these are just some of the measures that we put in place as we respond to climate change. Mr. Speaker, as soon as we are able to craft a program, we will present to the country a safe room, strong room program to ensure that every Jamaican household has safe shelter in the event of a climate change generated event such as an intense hurricane or rain or other hydrological weather events. So, Mr. Speaker, my final response to the member from North Central St. Catherine regarding councillors. I'm sympathetic to the request. The challenge is that there are rules relating to how the budget is crafted. This is in the central government's budget in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. This is a central government program. The Ministry of Local Government does not have that allocation. So I would gladly do so. And the minister came over to me as you were speaking and we were discussing it to see if it is possible. So there would be 2 windows for the same program. Would that be duplication? Maybe. So Mr. Speaker, the issue for us is the sentiment is a good one that we should include the councillors. We will discuss it. So the local government could also have an avenue for response. But what we will ensure is that there is an internal mechanism to ensure that you don't benefit twice from the same program through different windows. And that is what we have been doing, which is why we have said that if you have benefited from the Hurricane Beryl recovery program, you should not be a beneficiary under this program. Remember, Mr. Speaker, that the beneficiary, most of the beneficiaries for the hurricane burial program would have been on the south coast going north. Yes, we will ensure. What will happen? So what will happen, Mr. Speaker, is the members of parliament will submit with their TRN, and then that will be cross-matched against what we have already done. So we will pick out, we will be able to tag who has already received a benefit and point out to you that the person who you have submitted. We could supply you with a list before. We could. So, Mr. Speaker, just to be clear, we have no objections to councillors having the same facility. It is another layer of government, and there are constituents who go to councillors directly. But we will put in place the necessary measures in the back end to ensure that there are no duplications. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister, you were very crisp and clear as to your presentation, and you have given your conclusion to the presentation, but the member from St. Catherine Eastern is still with a question, and so we will offer you the privilege to answer that question.
Speaker, we are from the same alma mater, so I think you will give me that privilege too. But Prime Minister, I want to lend my voice to congratulating you for, and I'm certain you want me to thank the Prime Minister, so for this vision, because it is really a serious need out there now. But Prime Minister, I don't know if it can be done now or after. You see, the very poor that we talk about, the very needy, most times you give them the material, they do not have any transportation. And sometimes they don't even, you have to go back to the hardware and change even some of the names because they can't transport it. The last time I had to do some legwork in order that I could engage transportation for them to be able to transport to the various locations. There's another big problem is that it's not everybody want to do volunteerism. And therefore, Prime Minister, it's going to be a little bit of logistics. But I am going to say that it is important that we put aside a percentage to assist in terms of getting these repairs done if we really want something meaningful to be done for those who are most vulnerable. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, the issues raised here have my sympathy, and I too experience the same issues where persons go to the hardware and they are not able to pay for the transportation. They end up sometimes bartering some of the goods and all kinds of other innovative ways of trying to finance the transportation of the goods. I will consider ways in which we could accommodate. I like the suggestion, Mr. Speaker, of reserving a portion of the allocation for transportation, but I will consult to ensure that it doesn't breach any of the guidelines that are set for how these funds have to be used, because once they are budgeted and they are specific in the budget, we can't go outside of that. So I will have to consult to see what is possible. If it is possible, in the letter that you receive, it will outline what we could accommodate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Westmoreland Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Prime Minister, I want to thank you also for this allocation. And one of the reasons now, Mr. Prime Minister, is that in Westmoreland Central, there's a lot of informal settlements there. And of course, funding is there at the NIS. But because of the informal settlements, they are not privy to get that allocation. So just want to tell you how much I'm grateful for this, because this will help those that are on those lands that they don't have any documents for. So I would also use this opportunity to say to you, Mr. Prime Minister, that the informal settlements, if you can see how best we can get to regularize these lands. Thank you, sir.
Minister Grinch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we approach February, Reggae Month 2025, we want to honor the icons who built this timeless genre, amplify the voices shaping it today, and invest in the stars who will carry it into the future. It's more than a celebration, Mr. Speaker. Reggae is not just for entertainment or for fun. It's a lifestyle. It's a movement, as they would say, a movement of Jah people. The celebration of Reggae Month began when, as minister on behalf of the government of Jamaica and in consultation with players in the music industry, I wrote to the Governor General requesting his consideration in declaring February Reggae Month. As a result, the House will recall that Reggae Month was declared a national observation in 2008 by the Governor General. The decision to celebrate reggae in February coincides with the celebration of the birth of several of the genre's iconic figures, among them the King of Reggae, Bob Marley, on February 6, and reggae's Crown Prince, Dennis Emmanuel Brown, on February 1. This year, under the theme, Come Catch the Rhythm, we invite Jamaicans and the people of the world to embrace the reggae vibe. It's a spirit that resonates through the rhythm and the impactful lyrics of our talented artists. Our music has penetrated all corners of the world, and it is at the center of Brand Jamaica. So Reggae Month events are not just concentrated within the corporate area. My ministry recognizes that, as the saying goes, Kingston is not Jamaica, and has made continuous efforts to reach across the island. So this year, we continue to build on our partnership in the West, particularly in Negril, with events such as the Waves One Love Music and Jerk Fest, scheduled for February 7 to 9. These events will provide both locals and tourists with the opportunity to enjoy live reggae music every day. We continue the tradition of showcasing reggae through a full state of events organized by the Reggae Month Secretariat, by the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission, the Institute of Jamaica, Jamaica Music Museum, other agencies of the Ministry of Culture. Additionally, we offer our support to numerous commemorative events produced by independent organizers, including the Jamaica Reggae Industry Association, JIRIA, with whom we share a long-standing and mutually beneficial relationship. The schedule for Reggae Month 2025 is therefore both impressive and diverse. And I've asked that the schedule be handed out, and I think I saw them being passed around. And for those who wish, they can go to the Reggae Jamaica app for details on events and activities, because this schedule is subject to change as we update the calendar of activities. So we commence on Saturday, February 1 at 3:30 p.m. with a tribute to the Crown Prince of Reggae, Dennis Brown, at his resting place in National Heroes Park, celebrating his 68th birthday anniversary. On Sunday, February 2 at 10 a.m., the Reggae Month church service at Fellowship Tabernacle will offer prayer, praise, and thanksgiving. The Bob Marley Tribute Concert, scheduled for February 6 at Emancipation Park, will celebrate the 80th anniversary of the legendary icon's birth. An impressive list of performers will take the stage, with headliners being Skip Marley, grandson of Bob Marley, Sidella's son, and Bob Marley's son, Julian Marley. And the entire Marley family is expected to be there, including the matriarch, Rita Marley. There'll be other performers. It's going to be really a very impressive lineup. And what's also will add to this event is that we're having two bands, one traveling from Mexico and the other from Argentina, to participate in this tribute to Bob Marley. So as I said earlier, Lake Negril will come alive with events, and one of the main highlights during Reggae Month will be the Island Music Conference, hosted by Grammy Award-winning artist Shaggy. And this is from February 20 to February 22nd. We also will be honoring Marcia Griffiths for her 60th years in the business, when we will be presenting her with the prestigious Icon Award. And she will have a special performance backed by an orchestra led by John Williams. So for Reggae Month, there are a number of interesting events planned. Groundation, which is a lecture series hosted by the Jamaica Music Museum, will this Sunday, in fact, highlight Prime Minister Mayor Motley, who will be joining Groundation virtually to make a presentation on Bob Marley. I also wish to announce that we will be launching part 2 of the Jamaica Entertainment and Cultural Practitioners Insurance Plan. And this launch will focus on the health insurance component. So, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, reggae music has always been a beacon, igniting our collective passion as Jamaicans. Through its diverse expression, reggae inspires, relaxes, motivates, and unites people across the globe. Reggae music transcends language, culture, and other divides that might otherwise separate us. So I want to invite my colleagues here to participate in much of the events as they can, and to use this month with our music to unite us as we speak of one love, one heart. Let's get together and feel all right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that you revert to the agenda as stated to deal with public business.
Public business. Mr. Vaz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notices which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to pilot the electricity wheeling regulations 2024 made pursuant to Section 55(1) of the Electricity Act 2015. In keeping with the key objectives of the Act, that is the promotion of energy efficiency and the use of renewable energy and other energy sources, wheeling is another program which aims at providing opportunities for fuel diversification, development and deployment of renewable energy sources. The additional category for self-generation of electricity aims to support an efficient and environmentally sustainable energy sector that is affordable and accessible, an important step in moving progressively towards the government of Jamaica's achieving 50% renewables by 2030 and enabling an environment in which a more positive account of our stewardship of the planet may be rendered. Madam Speaker, I now highlight key elements of the regulations. Regulation 1, citation. Regulation 1 establishes the Electricity Wheeling Regulations 2023, which shall be coming into operation on the day appointed by the Minister by notice published in the Gazette. Regulation 2, interpretation, seeks to introduce definitions for the key terms used throughout the bill. For example, electrical inspector, firm capacity meter, wheeler, and wheeling meter. For the purpose of this regulation, Madam Speaker, an electrical inspector means a person licensed under Regulation 6 of the Electrical Work Registration and Licensing Regulations 2020. Firm capacity means the point at which electrical energy from the generation set is delivered by the wheeler to the system. A meter means a device of the type approved by the Bureau of Standards and owned by the single buyer that measures the amount of electricity consumed and exported. A wheeler means the self-generator who has entered into a wheeling contract with a single buyer. A wheeling meter means a bidirectional meter installed at the entry and exit points to measure the electricity entering and exiting the transmission and distribution system. Regulation 3 establishes a criteria whereby persons are to enter into a wheeling contract for wheeling services. The main criteria are A, a customer of single buyer that is not indebted to the single buyer, B, an average annual demand in excess of 1 MVA, C, ability to pay for all the costs associated with the interconnecting the generation set and the wheeling service, D, able to generate electricity on a sustained basis, E, the generation license is able to demonstrate more than 50% interest in the subsidiary entity at the exit point and subject to market study. F, single buyer determines that the generation set is compatible with the single buyer's transmission system after completing of a wheeling grid impact study. And G, provides all relevant environmental permits and licenses. Regulation 4 establishes that the single buyer shall implement wheeling arrangements where eligibility criteria in Regulation 3 are met, and that the wheeling arrangements do not negatively affect the service of other customers. The single buyer must conduct inspections and inquiries regarding the proposed generation set within 30 working days of being notified by the Minister that a license is granted. Regulation 5 specifies the application process for an application to be licensed for wheeling arrangement. A person may be licensed for wheeling by submitting to the minister the completed application form along with the requisite documents specified in Form 1 of the schedule and with the proof of payment in accordance with Form 2 of the schedule. The minister may request additional information or documentation he considers relevant. Regulation 6 provides that where a license is granted, the single buyer and the self-generator has 90 days of the date of a license granted to execute a wheeling contract approved by the office. The wheeling contract shall not exceed the period of the electricity license and shall be set out hereunder the following additional terms and conditions in relation to single buyer. A, to be paid at such rates for top-up, standby or excess energy sales determined by the office. B, to be paid the use of system charge together with such other rates approved by the office. C, compensated for costs associated with interconnecting the generation set to the system. A wheeler may only be granted one generation license for one activity and may not use one license to perform different activities related to self-generation of electricity. Regulation 7 addresses the duration of the license. The license issued by the minister shall be valid for 10 years. Regulation 8 establishes that a wheeler who enters into a wheeling arrangement must pay a use of system charge to the single buyer approved by the office and after consultation with the single buyer. The purpose of the system charge is to compensate the single buyer's transmission and distribution system and not paid as part of any other rates payable by persons who have not entered into a wheeling arrangement. Also, the system charge should be included but not limited to standard costs, losses, grid operations, maintenance improvements, and determination notice prepared by the office. Regulation 9 imposes on the single buyer an obligation not to charge security deposits or insurance coverage for a wheeling arrangement. If the single buyer commits the aforementioned offense, the single buyer is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding 2 million Jamaican dollars. Regulation 10 requires that where a license is granted and the self-generator fails to execute a wheeling contract within 18 months of the effective date of the license must be revoked in accordance with Section 13(1)(b) of the Act. Single buyer discharge of any obligation to connect the self-generator to the system and enter into a wheeling contract. And notwithstanding, Regulation 10 specifies that any request for an extension of time to execute the contract must be made in writing to the officer prior to the expiration of the period, and that the self-generator may make a subsequent application for a license in respect of the same generation set. Regulation 11 highlights that a wheeler should utilize a firm capacity in accordance with Regulation 3. Regulation 12, obligation wheeler to implement wheeling arrangements. This specifies that where a license is granted and contract executed, the wheeler is responsible to procure and utilize electrical protection systems and software to permit the system operator to monitor in real time the firm capacity required for wheeling arrangements. Regulation 13, restriction on the wheeler connection to the system, places restrictions on a person not to connect the generation set to the system unless the person A, received an electricity license for wheeling arrangements, B, executed a wheeling contract, C, received certification from a licensed electrical inspector for compliance with the specification, and D, received approval from the single buyer for grid connection. If a person commits to the aforementioned offense, the person is liable on summary conviction in a parish court to a fine not exceeding $3 million or, in default of payment of the fine, imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years. Regulation 14 outlines that the electricity supplied from a wheeler's generation set at the entry point must be metered using a wheeling meter with redundancy, that A, is capable of registering electricity flow in both directions, B, conforms to any standard specification, technical regulation, codes, etc., C, has been tested and met the requirements of metering standards approved by the office. If the wheeler does not have a wheeling meter that complies with the aforesaid, The wheeler is to purchase a wheeling meter from the single buyer and install at the exit points. Where the wheeler has a wheeling meter that conforms, the wheeler does not need to purchase another meter. If recalibration is required, the single buyer shall calibrate the existing meter at the expense of the wheeler. If it is that the wheeling meter referred to above is inaccurate or malfunctioning, the single buyer and the wheeler shall use the average of the past 3 months to agree. Where the parties fail to agree, the matter shall be submitted to the office for resolution. Regulation 15 establishes that the office shall resolve any disputes between the single buyer and the wheeler in relation to aspects of the wheeling contract, except where the wheeling contract specifies. Regulation 16, disconnection. The single buyer may disconnect wheeling services with at least 48 hours pursuant to the wheeling contract for overdue sums by the wheeler. Regulation 17 speaks to the compliance with relevant permits and licenses. The single buyer and the wheeler must comply with the following: A, electricity license for wheeling arrangements; B, wheeling contract; C, codes; D, environmental permits or licenses; and E, act regulations and other enactments. If a person contravenes the aforementioned offense, the person is liable to a fine not exceeding $2 million or a default of payment to the fine and imprisonment not exceeding 1 year. Regulation 18, duty of wheeler to maintain generation set, keep maintenance records and rectify defects. It states that the wheeler must maintain the generation set and equipment to ensure interconnection of the generation set for safe operation and keep proper maintenance records. The regulation also states that a wheeler is responsible for the rectification of any defect in the generation set up to the entry point and must not modify the capacity of a generation set or tamper with the meter or wheeling meter. Regulation 19 places a duty on the single buyer for the safe operation and maintenance of the system and replacement of a meter at a cost to the wheeler if the defect is because of the wheeler's act or operation. Regulation 20 outlines the obligation of the wheeler or the owner or the person in charge of the premises or firm capacity technology, as the case may be, to provide persons named in the provision reasonable and safe access to the premises and generation set for the government electrical regulator of utilities. They mention persons entering the premises for specified purposes are required to provide to the wheeler owner or the person in charge of the premises reasonable notice of inspection or audit. Regulation 21, where a person willfully contravenes Regulation 21 or 23, commits an offense and is liable to summary conviction at Paris Court to a fine not exceeding $3 million or in default of payment of fine, the imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years. Where a body corporate commits an offense under these regulations, the body corporate shall be liable to a fine not exceeding $2 million. Madam Speaker, I now turn briefly to the schedule in these regulations. The schedule is divided into two parts. Part A contains the application form for a license application for wheeling arrangements and submission checklist of supporting documents and information referred in Regulation 5. Part B contains the details regarding the application fees for Regulation 5. The license fee is $3,600 per kilowatt, or is this 36,000? This looks like 36,000. There's a typo. Ms. Campbell, check that for me, please. And the processing fee of $19,000. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, as Jamaica considers the challenge of global warming, health effects, and sustainability of fossil fuel dependencies, the passing of this bill is critical, A, to optimize Jamaica's use of sustainable and renewable energy sources, and B, to establish clean, cheap, and reliable sources of energy. I therefore seek the approval of the members of this Honorable House for these regulations. And in closing, it has been long in coming, but it is finally here. So that is the important part. I know that my colleague on that side will have to say different, but the minister standing here has gotten it to where it is, sir. And it has been coming it has been a long time in coming. I thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the minister is trying to preempt my presentation at the end. But, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the tabling of these regulations and to offer full support. In 2012, when we tried to effect two major policy decisions, one to incorporate net billing as a feature of the electricity landscape, which enable persons to generate their own electricity and sell the additional excess capacity to the grid. We were able to effect that by way of a policy dictate. It was attempted in the same way with wheeling, and just in case people are not too clear, wheeling occurs where a company operating in different locations generates electricity and is facilitated to provide electricity to its other locations by way of this connectivity to the grid. But that has always been fraught with difficulty. The OUR wasn't too clear on how to proceed, and at the time there were complaints that they were not being facilitated sufficiently by the single buyer. So it was in 2015 that we decided to change that by way of the new Electricity Act that we were able to pass. So the minister is quite right at my disappointment that it has taken since 2015, 7 years, for us to achieve this milestone. Many businesses have been waiting on it, and one of the important points that we have to emphasize is that it enables now the government in its objective of achieving 50% renewables to use this as a mechanism to so do, because we envisage that companies will now be able to use, whether it's solar, wind, or otherwise, but certainly it's going to be mainly solar, to establish large-scale facilities to enable these companies to provide for their needs at different locations. So we welcome that. I have to also express disappointment, and the minister knows, because we had also drafted regulations in 2015 in relation to how we regulate the LNG sector, because it was never the intention for there to be one player in the LNG sector. The aim was to enable transparent regulations so that other persons could import to Jamaica liquefied natural gas, but that there was this infrastructure that is owned by New Fortress Energy that by law will have to be made available for other players under the essential facility doctrine. And we are disappointed that we haven't seen the full benefits of LNG because of the lack of competition. And so we are urging that those regulations be brought. The minister is aware, because he chairs a committee. We have been reviewing the Electricity Act. 2015, the aim was after 5 years for there to be a full review to put us in good stead for the time that is approaching when a new license will be issued to the JPSCO. The outstanding matter that the minister is contemplating, and at the last meeting, I believe the committee is quite clear that in relation to special economic zones, we need to free up the people. And the only way Jamaica is going to grow in this area to provide good quality jobs and growth in the economy is if these persons who are participating can produce, generate electricity at a fraction of the 40 cents per kilowatt hour. And I'm happy that the committee is at one, and the minister I know is to take the matter to cabinet, and we urge that this be done with tremendous expedition. I totally support it, and I know my colleague here as well. So, Minister, probably you could say what is happening with the LNG regulations, but we support these regulations, and I will also urge for the Parliament to approve them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you very much, colleague, for your contribution. And just to say that we are on one on the both issues. You're aware from our discussions in relation to the LNG regulations where the gap was that we were able to find and are moving on it. It is essential and critical, obviously, to get the full benefit. And as you said earlier, that I don't need to repeat, the conclusion of the Joint Select Committee has been delayed for a few months over this issue of the SEZ, which has been highlighted by Member Hilton, yourself, and others on the committee. And we think it's so fundamental that we prefer to wait and to find a solution, which is not easy based on all the presentations that we have had. But obviously, we would not be doing justice to present a report for future generations if this was not captured. So you have my commitment that we are going to go to cabinet so that we can come back and conclude the Joint Select Committee in the shortest possible time. I thank you for your support, and I know that you are proud of me today. I can see it in your face.
House Leader. Minister. Minister. You asked for the motion to be read. Approved, sorry.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I'm asking that the bill that I presented be approved by the House.
The motion that you present,
motion.
the notice which
Yes.
to be approved.
Thank you.
You have to say it.
Be approved. Thank you.
The question is that the motion be approved. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business for the day. I therefore move that this Honorable House be adjourned until Tuesday, February 4 at 2 p.m. at the George William Gordon House. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the House now be adjourned until Tuesday, the 4th of February, 2025 at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned.